booth, so
yeah.
could set in
and
pretty
it's true.
quick.
You could lose your reference point really easy, particularly when you hear some stellar stuff. You're going to hear some stuff you never heard before, and it's like, now you're lost. You're in a maze, basically. The end of this month, there's another Can Jam happening in the world.
Yeah.
London, United Kingdom.
Oh, wow.
England, Great Britain. It's got a lot of names for that country.
Yeah. Very creative.
I don't know which one they prefer, but I call it the UK. But in London, they're having a Can Jam at the end of the month. It's Saturday, Sunday. I guess it's the 30th and 31st. So hopefully a lot of people get to attend and check out the goodies, because those shows usually have the best of the best. And I think Rune Labs is going to have probably a Diana headphone or one of our headphones on the Lena stack, the new DCS Lena stack,
Yep.
which will be a good listen if you get a chance. You get to use Rune Labs.
Yeah, they had those big, giant touch screens at the last
Oh, yeah,
show.
those were nice.
Yeah, it's like, they really stand out. It's like,
where'd they get
big.
those things from?
Yeah, I don't know what those are.
It was like commercial product, like you'd stick on a,
Yep.
stick in a department store to pick the clothing you wanted.
Something
Yeah,
like that.
anyway, yeah, check out Rune Labs booth, and I think TNA booth might have a headphone of ours. I don't know. But you could always check, just walk around. If you see an abyss, listen to it. So anyway, end of the month, be there, London. On that note, we want to remind everyone that before our Can Jam, which was earlier this month, we did a video on things to look out for when doing a trade show, or things to think about before doing a trade show. And it had to do with, cleanliness and all this stuff. But anyway, it's a good watch. A lot of people really teed us up on it. So we'll put a link below this one. So check it out. If you're going to that show, it's a good idea, and you haven't seen our video, because we've been doing shows for decades now, have a watch. It gives you some ideas to the pitfalls and what to look out for, and wash your hands and all that stuff. And on that note, today we figured we'll talk about why is it that, like, when you go to one of these shows, that sometimes you come away either liking or not liking the product. And usually it's the opposite of what you thought, right? You go in and you're like, oh, I'm looking for it. I really like this. And then you go, oh, I didn't like it. Or vice versa. Oh, I'm not going to like this, but I'm going to try it anyway. And wow, this is really good. And we've seen both reactions at shows.
Yep. There's a lot of reasons for it, and unfortunately, it just adds a bit more to the drama of high-end audio. Sometimes you hear something and you're wowed at a show, and maybe you even buy it, or you consider buying it in the future, and then eventually you buy the thing, you get it home. It isn't what you expected. It isn't what you recall it being. And alternatively, we've heard of many people that didn't particularly like something at a show. They heard it later, and it blew them away. So what causes these big differences? Sometimes you get large discrepancies.
Well, I know one of the probably main things is you're looking forward to seeing something, building it up, and then it could never, hit that expectation of what you think. You're like, I'm going to love this. Yeah. And then when you actually hear it, you're like, eh. And I think that I've had that happen a lot. You're like, I think this is the perfect thing that I'm looking for. And then you hear it and you're like, eh,
It's that preconceived notion in the brain situation where you kind of like you already got it figured out. You think you got it figured out till you go touchy-feely it. It's like, oh, it's not what I thought it would be.
And that's why you usually get wowed by things you didn't even expect to like, because you weren't, you come in with no expectation, and you're like, oh.
On top of that, though,
pleasantly surprised.
Yeah,
that can happen, but there's issues with shows. And unfortunately, I've seen quite a few instances where a vendor that happens to be showing a headphone or an amp or something that you're interested in, that's not something they're super familiar with. That's not something that's their primary thing that they deal with. They just happen to be using it to show something else off. And the trouble there is they might not be particularly familiar with what it needs. And we've seen this many times. People are showing a headphone with an amp that is not a good pairing, or they have it as a good pairing and then ends up people start moving things around and they have a weird configuration. Somebody bumps a gain switch or changes a setting somewhere and it sounds bad. And the people running the booth don't notice this for a period of time.
Yeah, you do get people that make rash judgments at shows too, and that's part of the pitfalls of a show. Is you got to be careful. I know people have said that about their. I didn't even think about this, but people were going up to our stuff at a few weeks ago at our show, and they're purposely raising the volume to see how loud the amp will play. And it's like, and that's their gauge for how powerful it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, that works, except we kind of outsmarted you on that one because we purposely had the DAC output lower so that people weren't A, going deaf, B, blowing things up, C, distorting. So we purposely used the lower gain setting on a DAC rather than higher gain, so we weren't allowing people to overdrive drive an amp to its limits. And then people go, oh, it's not powerful enough. Well, it's not really true. You didn't ask anybody. If you came in and go, hey, I want to hear how powerful this amp is. Well, all right, hang on. We'll go. We know the gear. We'll go over. If you know the gear, we'll go over and say, okay, we'll put the DAC on, 6 volts out or whatever versus 2. Have at it, right? Knowing that they're not going to damage our headphone with it. But I mean, a lot of times there's set limitations that the booth, if you're experienced, the booth personnel's already set that up for a majority of people so they can't damage something, can't hurt something, because again, we're at a show. And if you damage something at a show, you're usually screwed. That something no longer is playing, right?
It's a complicated balance. You want them to have a good showing, but you also try to make it as easy to use as practical and minimize the likelihood somebody inadvertently changes something that causes issues for someone down the road. And of course, people are changing gear and swapping things around, so that causes other issues and concerns you need to be worried about.
Yeah, that happens about once an hour.
But it happens a lot. We see all the time. We see people leave our table or the tables around us, and they get a bad impression for whatever reason. And the curious thing is, more often than not, the reasons, the foundation for this poor judgment, okay, I shouldn't say that, this critical analysis of the product is typically because of things that are invalid. They're making assumptions on
right.
things.
They're assuming that it was set up to do that, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's kind of like testing something and going, I'm going to test this to see how much power to put out, but you don't check the wall out to see if it's got 125 volts or whatever it's put out, right? You're running, and it's summer and it's 110, so now the amp is crippled by 10% of the power, and you're actually making measurements, and you go, oh, the manufacturer lied because it's not putting out the power. They said, well,
maybe
you're low voltage going in.
Well, one of the worst things I ran into is I don't know how long it was going on for, but someone's like, this doesn't sound right, and I'm like, well, we didn't change anything. And I looked, and there was someone changed the EQ settings and like cranked the bass up.
It happens so much.
It must have been happening for like multiple people here.
And I think we covered a lot of this on our earlier video with about how to deal with going to trade shows. Or if you're new at going to trade shows, watch this.
Yeah.
So, but the bottom line is we should key in more on, okay, so now you know all that. You're going in. You got a foundation. You understand, okay, maybe this setup's optimized, maybe it ain't. Maybe these people at the booth know what they're doing, maybe they don't. Right? We don't know.
The thing is, it shows some people get stuff for the first time, so they're hearing it with their stuff or whatever for the first time, so they don't really, it works, so there's never like any testing, optimization or anything.
I think you just might be used to something, and that's the other problem is you're used to a certain sound with whatever it is, and you're expecting. But we got to assume that you're coming in and you never heard this thing before, and you're making a rather rash judgment based on a short period of time with it, whatever it is, whether it's the amp or the DAC or the headphones. And that's the thing too, right? People tend to come in looking for a particular item, and they're hearing it, they're listening to a system, but they're judging the item that they're interested in.
Yeah,
that's a curious one.
How do you separate them?
Yeah.
How do you know that's what you're really hearing?
Well, someone did say that in Chicago. They're like, well, I don't know what part of this is making this good, but I like the whole thing, so.
How much?
Yeah.
I know this is always pretty much everything I always say, but it is extraordinarily difficult and way more complicated than people expect to judge something at a show. That's not to say they don't have value. I think shows probably are the best bet, but you really still need to have an open mind, even after hearing it at one booth. And typically, if you get a good experience, that's a good sign. That tells you the system can sound good or this hardware can sound good. Doesn't always mean it always will sound good. And if you get a bad experience, oftentimes that can mean less than a good experience, and that's the difficulty. You need to understand, is this actually set up in a way that I would use? did it sound bad because of negligence or incompetence or some sort of misconfiguration, or is it bad just because it is bad? And it's very difficult to know the difference.
We've been doing this long enough that what you learn is you need to have multiple experiences and you average it out.
Pretty much. Yeah.
You take the average of them, and you might find that there's usually an outlier. And the outlier could be good or bad, but if it's good, great, that's the way you go. If it's bad, then throw it out. It's not valid. Something was wrong, going on wrong there, and whatever it might be. So
the systems can be very complex at shows, and more often than not, it's very hard as an attendant to make sure your system's always sounding good, because you could be talking continuously. There really isn't time when you have a line to say, oh, no, don't put that on. Let me try and spend 30 seconds with it and make sure it's working properly and check settings. It's just impractical.
Yep. Sometimes it's just like,
it's just turning through. So you get 10 people that get a bad showing.
Yeah.
Right. And then somebody publishes something online.
Yeah. Someone put it to low gain or something and switch it back. That's the thing. If you're going to do something like that, put it back when you.
I never thought that people were judging this. The first time I never ran into that where people are judging the power of an amp by how loud it'll go.
Yeah, that was a newer thing.
It's a new one.
People always kind of
it's pretty
did that.
good. It's a pretty good idea. I would have done the same thing, but I never thought about it.
It's misleading, but people were doing that with some amps more than others. And the curious thing is it almost always depends on the volume of the knob, like the relative position of the volume knob. It has nothing to do, like they'll hit a point where it's playing loud enough, and then they observe how much is left.
Right.
And that's the perception of power to a lot of people.
Well,
which is not really a good way to do it.
Yeah.
It definitely screwed with a few people, in particular with like 11 Audio, since it starts here, right?
Yeah,
11. They're like, is this where it starts?
The volume controls
everyone says the volume's all the way up, but it's actually only like a quarter volume or something.
That's true. Normally you're at like 7 o'clock or so position
you
to start.
Look at it,
and theirs is at like 11.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. Who would have thunk?
Right.
But, it's all relative, though. I mean, the reality of it is, if you're listening to this stuff, you got to consider the headphone on the system too. If the headphone's extremely low efficiency, like ours is, of course you're going to be almost every amp's going to be at the top of the range.
That's
the way it's going to work. Yeah. Because there ain't a hell of a lot of amps that are bigger than that. If you think about it, so you got to consider what headphone you're using. If you threw a high efficiency headphone in there, you'd crack the knob on some of these amps. So you got to consider what you're using for a headphone.
Well, it is kind of nice with headphones, though, at least, instead of like speakers, is that people like bring their headphones and then you try it on the system. So at least you know what that sounds like with your current reference.
Right. That is a really good thing.
So that negates one factor.
If you're looking at amps.
Yeah.
Or if you're looking at
the other way, too.
If you have a headphone.
People bring their portables,
Right.
Higher
one
power
of the biggest
portables,
issues tends to be people being comfortable with this different product. And like it's oftentimes a physical thing. You physically feel uncomfortable with a different headphone on your head if you're very used to another headphone. And it could be harder for you to get accommodated with the sound, to really understand what the changes are if it feels different than you're expecting or you're used to. So having a headphone that you're comfortable with, so you could kind of like re-level yourself and kind of like bring your reference back with you, I think that's super helpful.
Well, that's true, especially with we talked about in the other video about fatigue.
Yep.
And it happens within a few hours usually or less, depending on how easily you're fatigued.
Well, that's the thing at a show, it's just booth, so could set in
and
pretty
that's true.
quick.
You could lose your reference point really easy, particularly when you hear some stellar stuff. You're going to hear some stuff you never heard before, and it's like, now you're lost. You're in a maze, basically.
Well, what if your headphones at home, the pair that you're super familiar with, are kind of average, and then you hear a bunch of systems back-to-back that are spectacular? It can be really hard to weed out the differences between them. How do you know which one's better? Usually what people will do is the last one you listen to is the best.
Yeah, right.
Well,
that's kind of how.
Good, yeah.
If you listen to a few in a row that are excellent, usually the last one tends to be the best.
Yeah, right. You have to go back around.
It is the one you remember. It was the last one. Yeah, it's like the third one. Which one was that?
Well, that's that comes back to that whole average requirement where you need to do multiple listens, and even if you go back to the same system the next day or hours
it could
later,
sound different. Yeah.
Just so let's try this again. See if it does the same thing for you that it did the last time, good or bad. I mean, maybe they corrected the setting by then. You went there. Oh, this ain't the way I heard it before.
Yeah, we get that sometimes. Somebody messed something up. We didn't notice it, and we don't know how long it was like that.
Yeah, you got to give it a second chance. Usually, if something's wrong, don't just say it's wrong.
Well, how do you know?
Because it was.
That's the trouble.
True.
Yeah. Well, you can't ask. I mean, that's the beauty of having people there who hopefully know what they're doing. Is say, hey, I'm hearing this or I'm not hearing this. What do you think? Is there a problem?
Well, the biggest issue with that, from my perspective, is a lot of people are a little concerned to say something like that because sometimes the booth attendants can be very rude.
Well, that's true.
That's the trouble.
Well, I ran it the first time I've ever seen this. The booth next to us, ZMF. They had a tube amp, and the one guy was listening. He's like, "This doesn't sound right," and it turned out one of the tubes failed on the amp. It's like,
Jeez.
so the one channel was all like, you know,
Yeah.
distorted.
Wonky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Hopefully, we have more tubes," and they
See,
did. But
well, I mean, anyone who's showing stuff should appreciate the fact that somebody finally told them. Because
Yeah,
we've
directly,
seen
yeah.
we've seen where a number of people go through the system and don't say boo.
yeah,
Yep.
And then the one guy finally says, "There's something wrong here."
It's pretty
You know?
rare for someone to say something.
Yeah.
Someone
I get
eventually
it.
does, though.
I get it.
when there's something wrong.
I mean, you know, we don't. The thing is, it's the people who are exhibiting really don't need to hear what everybody thinks of all the time. You know, no, that isn't what they're looking for. And I think that's where people are confusing it. It's not that you're telling people this is what I think about it, what it sounds like. 'Cause
Right.
the people working at a booth already know what it sounds like. Hopefully,
Well, probably.
they don't. They, you know, but what you're saying is something's wrong here. You know, it's obvious. It's like
Yep.
it's glaring. And
Well,
that's
a tube
kind of
failure is pretty-
That's always
pretty
nice
glaring,
to tell
yeah.
people that stuff. You know what I mean?
But
But-
it happens to everybody.
yeah.
So it's trouble. You really got to be careful. If you hear it from one system, one booth, one time, how do you know if it was a bad showing?
Right. Averaging.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the safest bet for like a positive or negative. A lot of people do that before they spend the money. They'll hear something at a show and they'll really like it.
Yep.
They won't buy it. So now they're reading on it. They're seeing what other people think, right? Over time. And maybe they find another place that has it. Maybe they look up the brand and they find a local store that might have something like it, or they could borrow somewhere or get it on trial. You know, that then they verify, right? They're verifying what they thought they heard or didn't hear, and that's the way to go too before you drop the long coin on this thing,
Yeah. It's really nice to know you're going to like it.
Yep.
I would always encourage somebody to do that.
if you can.
Yeah.
It's for some reason like a bad word to say in the industry that you should try to actually like the product before you buy it. But
oh,
I think you should.
It certainly helps.
well, we did run into one guy that was at New York Can Jam this year and Chicago, and he's like, he heard a Diana TC on something there, and he said he didn't like it, and he told everybody he didn't like it,
Yeah.
and then he heard it at our booth, and he's like, "Oh, I was wrong. I like
Right.
it now."
Right.
so
Right. Because of the way the product was presented, the
Yeah.
gear it was on, whether it was properly powered, there's a lot of factors. You
Yeah.
know, us being the manufacturer of the headphone, we just kind of already know that.
well, you've
And
heard
We see it
on-
all the time.
Yeah, right. But if you give your headphone to someone that makes amps or whatever, you know, they may not take the same care in setting it up, or that may be the best they got to offer, and it's
Sure.
the way it sounds on that headphone, and you're not
You
going to
do
do
see
any
that
better.
actually. Yeah. We've seen that quite a few times. We have a very demanding headphone, so of course we probably see more issues with low power than other people, you know, an amp that it doesn't really have enough drive. And commonly we have amp manufacturers that ask us to borrow a headphone at a show or in advance to say, "Hey, can you bring an extra one for me to show it with my new amp?" And they have a misunderstanding of how much power you could need for a very demanding headphone.
Yeah, they heard that our headphone's really good, so they figured it'd be good to show off.
So
their,
they think,
the
well, I have a really
capabilities.
good amp.
Yeah.
I'll bring this really good headphone that other people like,
Yeah.
and then it'll be a perfect pairing. But they don't know anything about the headphone.
Right.
They just know something
They've never
about the amp,
used
right?
it.
So then you put it together, and they don't really even try it oftentimes. They just put it out in front of people, and people get a bad showing.
So people are going there doing the power test.
Yeah, they crank the volume and like, well, this
It's like I'm
doesn't
at
have
full
enough.
volume. It's still not loud enough. This
Yeah.
amp sucks. So it actually doesn't help anybody at
No, it
that
doesn't.
point. No, you know, bad match is the bottom
Right.
line.
You
know.
hope people at shows have the experience to know what pairs well together, because a bad showing really doesn't help anybody.
Well, the reality is that amps like that, well, I mean, let's say you're at the top of the volume range, probably at a home setting, probably more than adequate. But at a show setting, because you're turning it
it's
up
a little higher
higher
normally.
because it's so loud there, you don't even realize how loud it is. You
Yeah.
don't. Really, you don't. You really don't.
Well, until
If
you
s-
put on some noise canceling headphones, you're like, "Oh,
Well, that's true. If you had them with you, right? It's
Yeah,
like, oh, this is loud. And it's like 85 dB in these rooms. It's pretty loud. So, you know, bottom line is, you'd be surprised how loud these things really are when you get them home, and you probably wouldn't even be playing that loud. But anyway, yeah. But these are things you have to consider.
Things to think about.
Yeah, when you go and try something for the first time with zero knowledge on it, other than I hope it's good,
Yeah.
because everyone hopes that you hope it's good.
But if it's bad, don't necessarily guarantee that it's always bad.
Right. Right. There
That's
could
a
be
difficult one.
There could be something going on there. Yeah.
It's pretty hard to get a good showing with something that's bad.
It's probably a bad most of
But
the
you
time.
can get a
it's-
bad showing with anything.
Oh, totally. It's easy. Yeah.
Anything.
We could walk around with a headphone and get 50 bad showings.
Sure. You can do that with anybody's
It's real
headphones, right?
simple.
Anybody's amp and
You know?
headphone stuff. It's easy.
Well,
Yeah.
that is the thing you see a lot. Other, not other, but amp manufacturers coming to us wanting to just try our headphones because
Yeah.
they came out with a new amp and they want to see if it works.
Well, because people are asking them, well,
yeah, right. It's like, well, I don't know. I never tried it.
People tend to use, I think, us and the Sysvara's litmus test is if you have enough power. Because if you
Right.
can
If
it
power one
powers
of
that,
those
you're good,
headphones, a 1266
Then you're
or that,
fine.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think you're going to be worried about power. You still have a problem with whether it's going to sound good or not, and
Sure.
that's a whole different issue altogether that people need to consider. It's not just about the power or raw volume; it's about how
Power
it
is one of the
sounds,
smallest factors.
for the most part. Once you get enough of it,
Right.
now everything else is a problem.
Yeah. Plenty of amps now have way more power than you need.
Yeah.
It's just a question of everything else.
How they sound. So anyway, that's the beauty of these shows. You get to play with stuff. I hope you guys get to go there, enjoy yourselves, have fun, be cool. Thank you for watching. Thumbs us up. Take care. And don't forget to subscribe. We got more stuff coming.